Pamela Snipe once fined a guy for excessive humming while walking his dog. So when she stomped onto my porch waving a red violation notice like it was the Declaration of Independence, I knew the HOA circus had rolled into town and the clown queen had arrived. What she didn't know, this cabin didn't just come with a deed. It came with documentation sharp enough to shave her clipboard in half. Drop a comment. Where are you watching from? And what's the most absurd thing your local clipboard queen has ever said? She squinted at my face like it personally lowered property values, then boomed, "Sir, this entire cabin is a visual violation." I almost offered her sunglasses, but decided to play it straight. She wore a navy blazer like it was armor and clutched her clipboard the way toddlers clutch a security blanket with delusional authority. I politely took the notice and glanced over it. Apparently my truck was too old, my trees too wild, and my mailbox too individualistic. I didn't realize federal crimes now included being a little rustic. "Can you show me the document that proves the HOA covers this property?" I asked, smiling the way you do when you're about to watch a firework malfunction. Pamela blinked. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. She finally sputtered, "That's not something you need to worry about," which is HOA speak for "I made this up 5 minutes ago." She leaned in like she was trying to intimidate me with fabric softener and scented policies, but I just folded the notice and handed it back. "Not signing today," I said, "but thanks for the unsolicited fan mail." Her cheeks flushed like someone who just lost a game they invented. She jabbed a finger at my face and barked, "You have 48 hours to comply or face serious legal consequences." Then she pivoted like a disgraced ballerina and power-marched to her SUV. She drove off slow, circling the neighborhood like a drone made of petty. Probably logging everyone's porch color and counting garden gnomes. I waved, mostly to irritate her. It worked. The brake lights flashed like Morse code for "I will destroy you." I stood on the porch for a good while after, sipping from Grandpa's chipped coffee mug, the one he used every Saturday before watching the lake roll by. This place wasn't just property, it was history in wood grain. My grandfather built this cabin with bare hands, calloused knuckles, and enough documentation to choke a zoning board. He always said, "Don't yell. Document. Don't panic. Prepare." So while Pamela was busy practicing villain speeches in her rearview mirror, I pulled out my phone and scrolled to the county land records office. Something told me the battle had just started. And I wasn't showing up with just lawn clippers confidence. Without paperwork is just noise in a blazer. What's buried in Grandpa's filing cabinet that might bulldoze Pamela's little HOA empire? I didn't show up to the county office with fury. I showed up with a form and a smile, told them I needed a routine property boundary resurvey for waterline maintenance, which is legalese for "I'm about to prove a certain woman in a blazer is full of fertilizer." The clerk stamped my paperwork like it was a passport to petty freedom. She didn't ask many questions, which was fine. I already had answers brewing stronger than my coffee. 2 days later, a county-licensed survey crew showed up in a van that looked like it belonged to NASA. They unfolded maps, set up tripods, and started scanning my land with equipment that beeped like it had opinions. I played the helpful homeowner role so well I should have gotten an Emmy. "Would y'all like some coffee?" I asked sweetly. They accepted. While the Keurig did its thing, so did my phone, sitting on the table, recording everything with the innocent confidence of a toddler with a magnifying glass. The inspectors chatted like I wasn't even there. One pointed toward my garden and said, "You know, this might be outside our zone." Ding! That was the moment my internal courtroom clapped. The other inspector shrugged and replied, "We've just been going off what the HOA tells us," which is kind of like trusting a cat with your aquarium. The words "might be" in government speak translate to "we've been pretending," and I had it all, on crystal-clear audio with creamer and sarcasm on the side. But the cherry on the revenge sundae came at the county building. After filing some papers, I wandered down a hallway lined with vintage maps, cartographic fossils of land claims from the 1960s, and there it was. My grandfather's name inked on a plot that sat just outside the HOA's legal grasp. I stood there for a minute, staring at that dusty old thing like it was a birth certificate for freedom. That map didn't just redraw property lines, it redrew the power dynamic. Pamela's clipboard might have looked official, but this dusty piece of parchment said otherwise. Back at the cabin, I played the inspector audio again just for fun. Might be outside our zone, echoed like a legal lullaby. Pamela thought she was tightening the leash, but I was busy snipping it behind her back. The best part? I hadn't even sent a single email yet. My grandfather used to say, "You don't shout your wins, you file them." So while Pamela was busy preparing HOA War Plan B, I was sipping coffee with government-verified receipts. Ever underestimate the man who offers you coffee while quietly recording your downfall? What's that dusty map in the county hallway that makes Pamela's whole empire look fake? Comment map if you're ready to redraw the battle lines. Pamela Snipe pulled up like her SUV had just been knighted by the HOA gods. She parked diagonally across my gravel driveway, as if that alone gave her jurisdiction. When she spotted the survey crew's laser levels and digital blueprints, her eyes went wide like someone had just graffitied her authority with permanent facts. "What exactly are you people doing on this property?" she demanded, marching up with that signature tone of clipboard royalty who thinks volume equals truth. The crew chief, a quiet man with a mustache made for depositions, didn't even flinch. "Routine, boundary verification," he said, adjusting a laser scope like it was more trustworthy than anything she'd ever printed. Pamela sniffed. "This property falls under our historical adjacency agreement," she blurted. Which I'm pretty sure is not a legal term, but something she invented during a hair appointment. I leaned against the porch rail with my coffee and watched this linguistic tango unfold like an HOA-themed courtroom drama with zero budget and lots of ego. She whipped out a laminated page titled Community Inclusion Clause, which sounded official if you ignored the fact that it looked like it was printed on her home printer between Pinterest sessions. "According to the Clearwater Unity Accord of 2003, all adjacent properties must remain compliant with community aesthetics," she shouted, shaking it like a prophecy. The surveyor raised an eyebrow so high it might have entered a different zip code. "Ma'am," he said slowly, "property boundaries are not influenced by aesthetic preference or assumed adjacency. They're based on recorded deeds and legal filings." She tried to rally, spinning phrases like neighborhood integrity and shared visual legacy, which honestly sounded like titles of overpriced colognes. The crew chief wasn't having it. He pointed at the map, then at the coordinates logged into his equipment. "This property," he said, tapping the line with lawyer-grade precision, "is outside the HOA boundary by over 50 feet. There is no legal overlap. There never was." Pamela went silent. Her mouth opened, then closed, then opened again like she was buffering mid-denial. It was beautiful, like watching a computer crash in slow motion. "The real cherry on this humble pie," one of the surveyors chuckled and muttered, "that's the third time this month someone's tried to enforce make-believe law." Pamela whirled around. "This is a serious violation of community harmony," she snapped. The crew ignored her like she was background noise on a conference call, and just like that, the legal rug slipped out from under her clipboard heels. I gave her my best "gee whiz" face and said, "Guess my lawn's just confident and free." When your power relies on assumptions, paperwork becomes your worst enemy. What clause does Pamela misquote next that makes the surveyor laugh out loud? Type clause if you think legal karma is heating up. Nothing says due process like a surprise HOA tribunal held in a rec center that still smells like expired yoga mats and lukewarm ambition. The flyer arrived in my mailbox folded like a courtroom summons, but addressed vaguely to concerned residents of Clearwater Pines. Translation: let's vote this guy off the island without actually telling him. So naturally I showed up early, brought snacks, and sat in the back row like a man attending his own roast. Because I was. Pamela had arranged chairs into little rows like she was hosting a TED Talk titled How to Abuse Power While Wearing Pearls. A projector lit up the screen with dramatic slides, zoomed in photos of my porch, lawn, and a rogue dome statue I'd forgotten I owned. "This property endangers our community's character," she began, voice wobbling somewhere between dramatic actress and overcooked turkey. I hit record on my phone and sipped from my Not Today Karen travel mug. It was showtime. Neighbors looked around like confused jury members who accidentally walked into the wrong courtroom. Some nodded, some squirmed. Then Pamela dropped the line that had all the flavor of accidental confession. Even if we don't have jurisdiction, we feel like we do. And there it was. The HOA version of the vibes told us so. A neighbor 2 rows ahead of me blinked so hard she knocked her reading glasses off. Another leaned over and whispered, "Did she just admit that out loud?" Then came the vote. All in favor of requiring immediate compliance and initiating legal action? Hands rose, most of them shaky like they weren't sure what they were voting for, just that the cookies at the refreshment table might be their only win tonight. I didn't raise mine, I waved instead. Pamela saw me for the first time, froze mid-sentence and stammered, You weren't invited to this meeting." I smiled sweetly. "Public meeting, public building. I'm just here to listen." She blinked, like I'd just served her a lawsuit on a cracker. As people began trickling out, with the awkwardness of folks realizing they just participated in a Banana Republic bake sale, I stayed seated and let my phone finish collecting evidence. When I walked out, no one stopped me. But a few neighbors nodded. One patted my shoulder and another whispered, "You might want to send that recording to someone. Important." Oh, I would. The only thing stronger than an HOA vote is a county inbox full of evidence feelings aren't facts, especially in front of a tape recorder. What's in Eli's email to the county that sets off Pamela like a firework in a library? Comment inbox if you want to see her next meltdown. Pamela called 911 like she was defusing a bomb. "There's a man trespassing on HOA property," she declared to the dispatcher, pacing her driveway like she was directing air traffic. Meanwhile, I was sitting on my porch sipping tea and reading a newsletter about how to compost with attitude. Her hands flailed, her voice rose, and her SUV's hazard lights blinked, in sync with her dignity falling apart in real time. 15 minutes later, Officer Jack Reynolds pulled up, like the human version of a not this again eye roll. He stepped out, slow, calm, and already over it. Pamela practically sprinted toward him, arms full of binders and righteous fury. "This man is a threat to our community standards and refuses to acknowledge our authority," she bellowed. Jack blinked once. "Ma'am, I'm going to need documentation of your legal authority over this property," he said, voice smoother than my granddad's front porch whiskey. Pamela's face did a double take. She opened her binder like it was going to cast spells. Officer Reynolds didn't flinch. That's when I decided it was time for a little show and tell. I walked up, handed him the official county survey, a copy of the HOA's own email disavowing jurisdiction, and offered him my phone with the audio from the HOA meeting. "This one's a highlight," I said. "She admits, even if we don't have jurisdiction, we feel like we do." The officer raised one eyebrow so high I thought it might request its own badge. As Jack flipped through the paperwork and listened to the recording, Pamela's confidence deflated like a pool toy in cactus season. She started rambling about unofficial annexations and emotional territory, which is the HOA version of trying to win Monopoly with Uno cards. When the officer hit the part of the email from the county that clearly told Pamela she had zero authority over my property, her phone slipped from her hand and clattered onto the asphalt, like it wanted no part in this legal collapse. Officer Reynolds closed his notebook and looked directly at her. "Ma'am," he said, with the slow disappointment of a high school principal catching a student cheating with the answer sheet taped to their forehead, "you've filed a false police report, made claims that contradict your own documentation, and attempted to assert control over land you have no legal right to." The silence was so loud it felt like a mic drop in church. Pamela blinked, opened her mouth, and nothing came out but static and regret. If you lie on paper, paper will lie on you, usually in front of law enforcement. What does Officer Reynolds say that makes Pamela drop her phone? Comment citation if you think she's about to cite herself into a corner. Pamela stood in the middle of the cul-de-sac like a magician mid-trick, only the rabbit had escaped, the hat caught fire, and the audience wanted refunds. Officer Reynolds had just laid out her greatest hits: false police report, jurisdictional fiction, and a one-woman show of HOA overreach. She tried to pivot like a bad lawyer in a soap opera. We were acting in good faith to preserve community standards, she croaked, like that was going to erase the paper trail that now looked like an obituary for her credibility. Neighbors began whispering, not the usual HOA gossip, but the kind of whispers you hear right before a town hall turns into a mutiny. She made us vote on fake violations, one resident asked, holding her toddler like even the baby was judging Pamela. Another neighbor pulled out his phone and started scrolling. Wait, didn't she raise our dues to pay for legal threats against him? Yep. Turns out Pamela's HOA regime was built on the same foundation as her hairline, fragile and overly sprayed. I handed Reynolds the emails I'd pulled through public records, each one a pixel in the big picture of her nonsense. The kicker? A county warning from 2 years ago stating clearly that my property was not under HOA jurisdiction. Pamela had not only read it, but replied, "Understood." She understood so well that she immediately printed out violation notices like coupons for intimidation, and now her neighbors were watching the house of cards collapse like it got wet in the rain. She reached into her bag of broken buzzwords. "This whole area falls under grandfathered easement agreements," she shouted, waving her arms like she was trying to summon a legal exorcism. Officer Reynolds barely blinked. "Ma'am," he said, "you're not just misinformed. You're misinforming others. That can become fraud real quick." Pamela gasped. Her clipboard, previously wielded like Thor's hammer, now hung limp at her side like it wanted to resign too. Then came the final blow. Reynolds turned to the crowd. "If any of you have received fines, threats, or votes based on false claims of authority, I recommend contacting the county." Pamela's head swiveled like an owl in a windstorm. Her kingdom of mulch fines and mailbox regulations was crumbling, and all she could do was stare at the cracks forming under her sensible flats. For once, the neighborhood wasn't afraid of her clipboard. They were furious with it. People don't lose power when challenged, they lose it when exposed. What's on the apology letter Pamela tapes to Eli's door the next morning? Comment. Tape. If you're ready for poetic justice in 12-point font. HOA signs are like warning labels on soup cans, intimidating until you realize they're mostly decorative and legally useless. So when Pamela finally slinked off into obscurity like a rejected Real Housewife of HOA County, it was time to do some landscaping of my own, the symbolic kind. I grabbed a screwdriver, walked up to the Clearwater Ridge Private Community WA Managed sign, and gave it the gentle funeral it deserved. Bolt by bolt, it came down like it had never earned the right to stand in the soil it bullied. The neighbors gathered slowly, like squirrels drawn to drama instead of acorns. "You really taking it down?" one guy asked, holding a casserole dish like he wasn't sure if this was a barbecue or a coup. "Yup," I replied, hoisting the sign like it was the final boss in a video game called Petty Governance, HOA Edition. By the time I set it in the back of my truck, someone clapped, then another. Suddenly, we had a front yard crowd, and nobody was afraid of clipboards anymore. Pamela? She was spotted across the street, loading boxes into a U-Haul like shame had a moving deadline. One neighbor swore she heard Pamela mutter, "I'll start fresh somewhere that appreciates rules," which is exactly what people say when they mistake obedience for respect. No one waved. No one stopped her. She pulled away like a disgraced pageant mom who just lost the crown to a child with actual talent. That night, I walked into my workshop and carved a new sign by hand. Simple, solid oak, just like Grandpa used to do. The next morning, I planted it right where the old HOA monument stood. It read, "Private property, original owner since 1988. No serif fonts, no buzzwords, just legacy in wood." By afternoon, the neighbors returned, not for outrage or enforcement, but with folding chairs and lemonade. One lady brought brownies like they were peace offerings for years of silence. They apologized, shared how they'd been fined for hostile grass patterns and overly festive bird feeders. We laughed. We planned. We decided we didn't need a queen, we just needed common sense and a community Google Doc. Real authority isn't given, it's earned by the people, not enforced by a font size. What homemade sign did Eli carve that's got the whole neighborhood smiling? Comment would if you want to see what replaced the HOA's crown jewel. The only HOA meeting we hold now is the one where Brenda forgets the coleslaw and tries to blame supply chain issues. Yeah, Brenda, the supermarket's across the street, not across the ocean. It turns out when you remove the threat of $75.00 fines for improper gnome orientation, folks suddenly remember how to act like neighbors instead of suspects. So I did what any vindicated landowner would do. I fired up the grill, iced down the sweet tea, and turned my grandfather's porch into the most legal party zone in 3 counties. As the smoke curled into the sky like a retirement letter for tyranny, the crowd grew. Lawn chairs appeared like mushrooms after rain. Kids played in the driveway, and someone brought a karaoke machine powered by petty freedom. The HOA was officially out, and the Neighborhood Vibes and Weeds Task Force was in. That's what we called our new informal maintenance group, chaired by the same guy who once got cited for excessive porch laughter. Democracy had never sounded so off-key. The best part? No clipboards, no whispers, no threats disguised as memos, just real talk, deviled eggs, and a community that finally remembered how to function without fear of geranium regulation. I gave a short speech, nothing fancy, just thanked everyone for showing up with open hands instead of upturned noses. Someone shouted, "Speech! Speech!" And I said, "My only campaign promise is more ribs and less bylaws. We voted unanimously to make that our mission statement." Midway through the brisket, a neighbor raised a beer and joked, "Good thing you read those bylaws. Next time we'll just nominate you for sheriff." I laughed, but part of me paused, because that's the lesson. Not just that I won, but that I knew what I stood on, what I stood for, and how to stand when it mattered. This cabin wasn't just timber and shingles. It was legal proof that roots matter more than rules. And just before the sun dipped behind the lake, I unveiled my final masterpiece, a porch swing, hand-carved. Painted with the words, "They tried to find me for weeds, so I planted a forest of facts." The swing was made entirely from the dismantled HOA signposts. Poetic? Absolutely. Petty? You bet. Effective? More than 1,000 compliance letters ever could be. So there I was, sitting on the porch Grandpa built, sipping coffee from his chipped mug, watching a neighborhood that finally learned the difference between leadership and loudness. The HOA sign was gone, the threats were gone, and the peace? That was earned. I didn't raise my voice, I raised my facts. I didn't build a fence, I built a case. See, they tried to find me for weeds. I planted a forest of receipts. They tried to evict my legacy, I invited the law to the barbecue. And while Pamela packed her clipboard and moved out, I unpacked something more powerful. Community without fear, cooperation without control, and ownership rooted in truth, not intimidation. When someone screams, "Rules!" but can't back them up, ask for the paperwork. When they wave authority like a wand, just know, truth is the real magic trick, and never underestimate the neighbor who owns a coffee mug, a tape recorder, and the patience to read bylaws for fun. This wasn't just a petty win, it was poetic justice. It was legacy outlasting ego, facts beating fiction, and a porch swing built from the ruins of arrogance. If this story made you laugh, nod, or remember your own run-in with a clipboard tyrant, drop a comment below. Share your wildest HOA moment. Tell us how you stood your ground, or how you're planning to. Like the story if you believe real power comes from patience and preparation. Subscribe if you want more stories where the good guy wins, not with fists, but with footnotes. Because the next time someone tells you, "You don't belong here," you might just respond with, "Actually, I own the place." Stick around. The next episode of Justice is already brewing.